draft. All right, says we're live on Facebook.
Okay. And we're live on YouTube. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Fantasy Inferno here from rotoheat.com. This week, we're going to be talking about our regression players. And if you notice, we got that bright, shiny new guest face on, or not really new, I guess. Jacob filled in for me a couple weeks ago, and so now he's filling in for Rob Sullivan. And well, Jacob, welcome back to the show, and why don't you tell folks where they can find you?
Yeah, so I'm not really on social media much, but you can find me in the Discord chat, and then you can also find me on Facebook, and those are really my two go-tos.
All right, and of course, Bryce is here every week, but Bryce, why don't you let folks know once again where they can find you?
Yep, same as always, guys. You can always find me on the Facebook. I'm on there quite a bit, just putting my input on little posts and things like that in both the redraft and the dynasty pages. And then you can also find me in the Discord. Might not be as active in the Discord, but I'm always looking at stuff and things like that, and it's free to join. So make sure you guys find the link somewhere in our Facebook page and join that Discord.
All right, and you can find me on the Discord some, and on the Facebooks some, and on Twitter some at RotoHeatRob, and it just depends how often I can get to those social media platforms, but I try to get there a little bit. We want to remind everybody, if you're watching our live stream or our playback on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Also, if you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, like and subscribe there as well. We really appreciate that. And again, you're going to see on the bottom, we got the Discord rolling through. Go join that. We've got the Patreon account, and then we've got the two Facebooks, the RotoHeat Redraft Facebook, and our RotoHeat Dynasty Facebook as well. Want to have you guys go check out all of those. But let's get into our news and notes. And, well, the first one, Antonio Brown finally got his wish, and he got his suspension handed down from the NFL. 8 games, whether he is or is not on a team. And so finally he can start having some conversations with teams and knowing what it's going to look like. What do you guys think about that?
Go ahead, Jacob.
Well, I think that I know he's been in talks with the Seahawks probably the most, and I know that after the suspension was handed out, I believe it was Pete Carroll who spoke a little bit more on it. So I think they're still looking in, because I know that they're still waiting for Josh Gordon to see what his suspension will look like, or not suspension, but if he'll be able to reinstated into the league. But I also know that the Ravens have been looking at him, and Lamar Jackson just rants and raves about him. So I know for me, I own him in both my fantasy leagues, and I definitely own him for my redraft. And so I'm hoping that it pans out.
Right. AB as a character. He gets a lot of hype for a guy that didn't play football for a whole year, or basically a whole season. But the 8-game suspension probably is just good for him, for sure, because now teams, knowing what's going to happen once they sign him, will be able to make a more clear decision rather than the unknown. So, like you said, I heard the Seahawks, but then I heard the Seahawks backed off, and now it's mostly hype from Lamar Jackson, who's talking about how he wishes he would get AB. And usually when you have a franchise quarterback that wants a free player out there, he usually gets what he wants. So it'll be interesting to see if they could get him, because they do kind of need a good veteran wide receiver presence. He would be a huge asset to that team. So what do you think,
Yeah,
Rob?
I think a week or so ago that AB wasn't really on the draft radar for our redraft leagues.
Mm-hmm.
But this news definitely puts him on the radar for the end of your bench, a late round pick. I assume, though, that you're gonna, as we progress and get closer to the start of the season, those ADPs, he's going to start rising. At some point, it's not going to become worth it at his ADP, at his price,
Right.
because he's going to keep rising up, and he's going to be out for more than half the regular season. And so, there's kind of that fine balance of when you find him. But right now, if you've been having some redrafts and been getting him late, or, maybe if you still have some redrafts, coming up this weekend or something, very, very soon, and he's there in the late rounds, I'm talking the double-digit rounds, it starts to become possibly a pretty good value there.
Mm-hmm.
But you brought up the Ravens, and, well, one of the reasons I think the Ravens and Lamar Jackson won them is because Antonio Brown's cousin, Marquis Brown, Hollywood Brown, is on that team, and he's also on our news list. And not for any reasons like his older cousin is. This kid, though, bulking up. And J-Wall, you had some thoughts there on Marquise Hollywood Brown bulking up this season.
Yes, I was not a fan of his last year because, he was 157 pounds, and I just don't see much success in the NFL at 157 pounds. Obviously, he did find some, but the fact that he put on 23 pounds, and if he's anywhere close to the same speed that he was, that is huge for a guy like him who really has that opportunity to step into that wide receiver one, dominant spot in Baltimore. So I like him a lot.
Yeah. Marquise Brown's small, and I think during the season you saw that he was taking hits early in games, and you kind of see it was affecting him a few times. He didn't see any long-term, injuries out of it, but that's just in your rookie year. You get to see the difference between college and the NFL size players, and obviously the coaching staff saw that too, because they put together some type of program, gave him probably a trainer and a diet and things like that for him to pack on the pounds probably in a good way as well, which is extremely important. So that way he could still keep that speed. So now he's getting to the size of a player that he needs to be successful in the NFL. He's got the speed, and speed kills. We saw it in week 1 last year. So if he can just show us glimpses of some of the stuff he was doing last year, it's going to be not something super exciting to hear, but I think owners will be excited to see. It's going to help with durability as well. So what do you think, Rob?
Yeah, no, I think the extra weight will be beneficial to him.
Right.
Guys who are too slight a frame, you always worry about those injuries. And as you guys said, you saw that a little bit last year. And hopefully this extra weight will serve him well. Moving down the list, we also had some news. I think it was first Ian Rappaport today talking about Bruce Arians, saying that Ronald Jones is going to be the guy in Tampa Bay with LaShawn McCoy, Shady, doing a little bit more in the pass-catching role. But as far as the guy on first and second down, or the guy between the tackles, looking like Ronald Jones, that's good for his value. Also got to remember Keyshawn Vaughn is not that bad, but he is currently on the COVID list. Of course, practice doesn't start for another 12 days, so plenty of time for him to get off of there. I think I like Keyshawn Vaughn a little bit more than Ronald Jones, but given our 2020 COVID situation, it's going to be very difficult for him to take that job away from Ronald Jones if it in fact is his. That's my take there. What do you guys think?
I think I can imagine our fearless leader, Rick, just rolling his eyes to this information. He hates Ronald Jones, but I think I trust the running back situation there in Tampa Bay as much as I trusted it when Tom Brady was in New England. So I probably won't take much. I won't take much into that, because a lot of times coaches will say that, especially when they bring in a new player. They're not going to just tell the veterans, like, or the people that were there, oh, this guy's the guy now. Sucks for you. So LaShawn McCoy's out of his prime. Obviously, he's there as a veteran presence for Tom Brady. So it's going to put some Rojo owners at a little bit of ease, because I think they're also a little uncertain of what what's going to go on there in Tampa Bay, since Tom Brady's really never had such a prolific running back for fantasy value behind him in that offense. So, but we'll see. Arians is also known for utilizing one running back, so it'll be interesting to see how that combination mixes. What do you think, Jacob?
I just think that the biggest thing with him coming out and saying that he's the guy is just the overhype that it could bring. Like I think that Ronald Jones I think he's a really solid back. I personally probably wouldn't take him any farther than my running back 4, maybe 3, just because again there is even with him saying that, I still think there is some uncertainty that could change by the end of the year. But I would agree with your point, Bryce, saying just like it does, especially as a Ronald Jones owner, like it puts your mind at ease a little bit. Like, okay, there's going to be some value going into the season. So
right,
yeah.
All right, yeah. And before we move on, I know it's another sport, but I got to give a shout out to my boy, a guy I used to play ball with when we were a little bit younger. Made it back to the big leagues yesterday after 5 years out of the show, and pitched for the Minnesota Twins. And so shout out to my boy Caleb Thielbar on working his way back now into the bullpen for the Minnesota Twins. So now we can get back to football. I just wanted to give him a little shout out. Kind of a cool story there. At least for personal reasons for me. And of course, as always, we answer questions at the end of the show. So if you got those, get those into us. But now let's get into our topic for the day, and that's going to be regression candidates for this season. And well, I'm going to kick it off with probably about the most obvious guy on the board, and that's going to be Christian McCaffrey. CMC had a ton of work last year. And, you know, you can't imagine that a guy's going to get that kind of work 2 years in a row. It just, throughout history, it doesn't happen. In fact, when you look at the number of touches he had, having last year 287 carries, another 116 receptions, when you get guys who have 350 plus touches, which he had 400 plus touches, those guys almost always take a huge step back and almost always seem to get hurt in that year following. I hope it doesn't happen for CMC. He's a fun guy to watch, but I just don't see a way he can be as efficient as he was last year. They've added Robbie Anderson. They've got a quarterback upgrade. You have to assume the passing game's going to be better. This team's also going to be behind all the time. And so, you know, our 142 targets, yes, 142 targets going to go to Christian McCaffrey again. I don't see it with a better quarterback who can get the ball down the field a little bit more. And, I mean, you look at that 142 targets, I mean, that's like Michael Thomas type numbers he was getting as a receiver, plus all the running work. Just crazy. What are you guys' thoughts about CMC regressing here in 2020?
Okay, Jacob.
I think that he's obviously going to regress. I mean, I don't think there's really any doubt about that. But I would say probably the one thing I would say is he still does have that RB1 potential. So that's not off the board. But just don't expect as many points every week is probably my biggest thing. But I'd say besides that, the biggest thing to worry about is injury just because of all that work. But I don't know. I feel like CMC is just a truck, and I just feel like, you know, he's going to put in the work. But having a more mobile quarterback in Teddy is definitely, I would think, would limit a lot of those pass catching attempts as well too.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty safe to say the number one running back who averaged over 30 points a week is going to regress. I mean, that's insane. I was trying to look back on just real quick, right as you mentioned his name on when's the last time a running back even put close to that numbers, and I couldn't find one. I just looked back 3 years when Todd Gurley was. Go ahead.
I want to say he was second all time to LaDainian Tomlinson the year
I was about to say that
touchdowns or whatever.
Yeah, that's you're not gonna. So it's safe to say that he's definitely going to regress. But as Jacob said, he's going to still fight for the number one running back position this upcoming year. I think with the addition of Teddy Bridgewater, it actually almost puts because I own Christian McCaffrey in a couple leagues, and it puts me almost a little bit at ease because I don't want him to get that amount of touches because I want him to last I don't want him to last maybe just 1 or 2 years. I'd rather last him 3 to 4, 5 years of being a top 5 running back rather than just putting up an insane amount of points in just 1 year. Because in fantasy, you're especially in dynasty leagues or even long keeper leagues, you want him for years. But in a redraft sense, obviously you would love him to get that amount of points again, but it's just not going to happen. So yeah, he's going to regress, and it's probably not a bad thing for his health. So he's still fantasy relevant for years to come. But he's not going to average 31 points a year. If he does, he's going to be arguably one of the best fantasy running backs of all time. So,
and definitely like Jay Wall said, still has a good chance to be a running back 1, but there's going to be some regression. Also, just his 2-year total for touches, 729 touches in 2 years. His 3-year total up around 950. He has more touches in 3 years than Derrick Henry has in 4 years. And so another guy who could have been on our regression list but wasn't, Derrick Henry, and at least I don't think anybody snuck him on me. No, you guys didn't. So that's just crazy to think about too. Is he's got, you look at the top, 2 of the top backs right there, and one with a whole extra season, and he's got 100 fewer touches than CMC over 4 years, and just 100 more touches over the last 2 years in 4 years. So that's just kind of crazy to think about. Bryce, how about a regression candidate from you here?
Okay, so real quick though, another thing on Christian McCaffrey, he had over 160 more points than number 2 running back last year. That's another thing to note. This is absolutely insane. So my first regression candidate is a guy who actually was, I don't know if we had him in our change of scenery player episode, but Austin Hooper is a regression candidate for me. Last year, he finished as tight end number 6, averaging roughly 18 points a week. I think he's kind of an easy one for me because he moves into an offense where it's so crowded with talent. Because we know Odell Beckham Jr. is probably going to get more touches. Their running back situation is probably the best in the league with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. They have a great number 2 wide receiver when he becomes healthy in Jarvis Landry, with even some good backups that really haven't got to maybe display their talents yet. So Austin Hooper is not going to see as many targets as he did in Atlanta. We have yet to see Baker Mayfield really utilize the tight end position. So I don't think we can imagine that he's going to use Austin Hooper in the same way that Matt Ryan did. I feel like everyone had high hopes for David Njoku and was just disappointed year in and year out. Whether that was due to injury or not, but I still don't believe he was seeing as many targets as people thought he was going to with Baker Mayfield and that high-powered offense. So Austin Hooper to me is an easy candidate for a regression this year. What do you think, Rob?
Yeah, I completely agree. I don't think that that's a great situation for him to be going into. Just the volume in that offense is going to be so much different. So if you look at Matt Ryan over the last 2 years, he's thrown over 600 passes each year. Over his career, he's right around probably 590 a season as far as attempted passes. Baker Mayfield last year attempted 534 passes. That was a pretty significant jump, about 50 passes from the year before. So obviously a lower volume offense is what it has been. But then you also have to consider that it's a new coaching staff there, and it run first kind of style with Kevin Stefanski, and last year Kirk Cousins in that offense with Stefanski as the offensive coordinator threw just 444 passes. So they could actually have fewer passes available this year. Not only that, they're going to have Kareem Hunt the whole year. As you mentioned, tight end David Njoku has been a disappointment. OBJ is going to be healthy, so there's going to be more targets there. There's a lot of guys to take targets with an offense that's probably going to be low passing volume. And if you're good at that, you have to be uber efficient. And I don't think Austin Hooper's ever been that guy. His stats have come based on being a high volume tight end. He's not the guy that's a Jonnu Smith who's gonna break a 60-yard play very often. He Hunter Henry who's gonna do that. A Rob Gronkowski who just nobody can cover, and he's gonna get loose and just bowl guys over. It's just not in his nature, and so I just don't see any way that Austin Hooper lives up to the hype that he's had, and he's gonna probably not come anywhere near what his stats were last year. I would say I could see a 30 or 40% reduction.
I would say for me, like Matt Ryan was his fantasy. Like I just think outside of that offense, and of course that's why a lot of people, including me, are high on people like Hayden Hurst, because they're going into an offense where you don't even necessarily have to be the best guy in the world, but you're just going to get a lot of targets and a lot of looks, and that's going to, come to fantasy value and relevance, even if, they might not be the best player in real life. And so, yeah, I think Hooper is going to fall, and I think he's going to fall. I know it's crazy, but I think he might even fall out of that tight end 1 conversation, be closer to tight end
absolutely think that.
15 to 18.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Just because, and I know you guys have brought up Njoku, but I mean, he's still going to be part of that offense too. So,
right.
I don't know. I don't like the timeshare there.
Yeah, too crowded.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say a 30-40% reduction takes him out of tight end ones for me too. I mean, he's a streamer. He's going to be one of those guys, a streamer. He's not going to be the guy you can count on anymore at best. So at best, a streamer. Jay Wall, you're your first guy here on our regression show.
Yeah, so it's also kind of a pretty obvious one. It's Marlon Mack. He was pretty consistently over the past couple seasons in RB2 and put up pretty solid numbers and was pretty reliable. But after drafting Jonathan Taylor, I just don't think that he's going to last. I think that Jonathan Taylor is going to come in pretty immediately and take over that position. Unlike Mark Ingram and J.K. Dobbins, where there might be some time in between, I think Jonathan Taylor's just going to come in and be like, I'm the man, give me the ball, I'm going to take over kind of thing. And so I think, barring injury, I just don't think Marlon Mack is going to be much of anything but a handicap. So, or handcuff. So I think that's just something to be mindful of if you're a manager of his, just to know that there's just going to be a steep drop off, and you're probably looking at even closer to like RB4 numbers, and maybe worse, just depending on how they use him, because they're going to use Hines in the pass game, and so it just kind of further puts him behind.
Yeah, right. I couldn't agree more. I think as soon as Jonathan Taylor got drafted by the Colts, like Marlon Mack's value just fell off the face of the earth. Especially when we're talking about redraft. I mean, dynasty owners obviously just probably got a huge pit in their stomach. But for redraft, it's good because now you always want to get excited about rookie players, and I love playing redraft in the sense where I play with people that do get excited, because rookie players rarely come out and just light it up. You got your people that are exceptions like Zeke and Saquon, Gurley had a great rookie year. Leonard Fournette had a solid rookie year. But, guys like in this draft, it was more of like who got drafted where. And I think that Jonathan Taylor got drafted in probably the best situation for a running back. That offensive line is elite. They are top. They're arguably the best in the NFL. They're more known for their pass blocking, but they're great run blockers too. Don't get it twisted. And like you said, there's only 2 running backs now. I only liked really 2 running backs coming into this season, and that was Jonathan Taylor and Cam Akers, and that was just basically so on their opportunity to easily walk into the number 1 role. With the news in Kansas City, I now do obviously like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but his hype is through the roof, and it's absolutely insane. So, yeah, Marlon Mack's going to see regression. If anything, he's just going to fall. He might go undrafted in most leagues. Even if he does get drafted, he's going to end up on the waiver wire at some point during the season. So, yeah, a great candidate for regression, because he was actually pretty relevant last year, more relevant than people thought. So, so he's gonna fall. He's gonna fall hard. What do you think, Rob?
Yeah, Marlon Mack has been very efficient as a starting running back.
Right.
He's going to probably start the year as the RB1. But like you said, it's not going to take very long for JT to take that job away. And when that happens, I think Marlon Mack is done. Uh, Jonathan Taylor, once he gets the job, he's going to run away with it and dominate the touches there. Um, in fact, when it comes to redraft, I'm probably passing completely on Marlon Mack. If there's a guy I'm
Yeah.
going to go after that isn't named Jonathan Taylor, it's Nyheim Hines, just because of how much Phillip Rivers likes to dump the ball off to running backs, and that's not something either Mack or JT does very well. Bryce, how about your second regression guy?
Okay, I've been saying this guy's going to regress for like this will be year number 3 now, so it's got to happen eventually. I don't even love this regression pick, but I think it's coming, and this might be the year, and it's going to be Julio Jones. So Julio Jones is a freak of nature athlete. He's a great wide receiver, but he's getting old. He's 31 years old. He'll be 32 at the very end of this season, so he's pretty much playing the whole season at 31 years old. But he's been top 5 for I don't know how long, and I think this is finally the year that he drops out of the top 5. The NFL right now is absolutely stacked when it comes to the wide receiver position. There's so many great talents out there. Just some of them haven't reached their full potential. And I think Julio Jones' his best years are now officially behind him. I believe this is Calvin Ridley's 3rd year, correct? He's going into his 3rd year. Usually that's the year that wide receivers, like him, start to really kind of take over. I think Julio did kind of the same thing in year 2 or 3 when it was Roddy White, and I think it's just happening again to him. So there's really no evidence I have in the sense of like Julio Jones just getting older and the people around him getting starting to step into their prime and get more comfortable in the NFL. So I won't be surprised if Julio Jones is in the top 10. But I think he finished this last year at wide receiver 4, averaging roughly 20 points a week. And I think that can get to around, 16, 17 points a week, if not a little bit lower and more closer to like wide receiver 8, 9, or 10. So you're not a huge regression candidate, but a guy that I feel like is going to regress a little bit this upcoming year. What do you think, Rob?
Yeah, I think you're wrong.
Fair enough.
Julio's got at least another year, 2, 3 years with him. I mean, he has shown no signs of the aging, none whatsoever. If you think back to when Julio came into this league, when we were going into year 3, you could tell that there was a noticeable drop in Roddy White's play at that time, and that Julio Jones was going to become the alpha. Now, Julio Jones hasn't shown any of that. Now, Kelvin Ridley has gotten steadily better, but at least from the eye test, but statistically he hasn't changed. In fact, his rookie year and his sophomore year were basically identical. He caught
there was like one more pass, right?
One fewer pass last year and he had 45 extra yards. He also got 3 fewer touchdowns. So and missed more games. So I agree that Calvin Ridley is going to keep taking those steps up, but Julio Jones isn't ready to step aside. You also have to remember, and we just talked about it with Austin Hooper moving to Cleveland, there are a lot of vacated targets right there. 97 targets, 75 receptions for Hooper last year. Hayden Hurst isn't that. He's not getting them all. That's where Ridley's going to get his spike, but that's also why Julio Jones is staying relevant. This is going to be a team that has a chance at 2 top 12 receivers this year. I think next year, we have at least 2 more seasons before Julio Jones starts regressing. J-Wall, your thoughts?
Yeah, so on top of that too, I mean, Mohamed Sanu also is gone, so it's even more targets. And I know whoever steps into the 3rd is, going to get there some, but I don't think it'll be the same volume. But also, the research shows that especially for like alphas and studs like Julio Jones, like the regression age is 33. And so to me, I love when people give up on people like Julio Jones, because I'm like, this guy's a freak. So like, I think he's going to even go beyond that 33 mark, because I mean, to me, I look at a guy like Larry Fitzgerald who continues year in and year out to be fantasy relevant, and he's old and he's not like crazy relevant now, but he still can easily give you a decent week if you need, because I mean he's just a dude with sure hands. He knows how to play, and he's just so fundamentally sound. And I think Julio, in a lot of senses, is just kind of the same type but different player in the fact that he's just a dog. And I look at Calvin Ridley as someone who isn't necessarily an alpha and who isn't necessarily ready to take that step into the alpha role. I think kind of like AB and Juju, they complement each other really well. And so, yeah, I just don't see Julio dropping out of the top 5.
I'll also add to that, I don't think we've seen a wide receiver of this caliber entering his. Well, I mean, he's still only what is he, 31?
Yeah,
31.
So he hasn't even entered the middle 30s yet. But even when he gets to that 34, 35 range, we haven't seen a wide receiver of this caliber play to that age and not decide to retire since Terrell Owens. And Terrell Owens put up almost 1,000 yards at 37 years old. There's no reason to think that Julio Jones won't still be doing this for another 5, 6, 7 years.
exactly.
But again, for sure, not at least the next 2, in my opinion. He's still got it.
Mm-hmm.
My second guy to regress is going to be A.J. Brown, and this is purely volume based. A.J. Brown's numbers last year were ridiculous. His 20.2 was it yards per reception was just 20.2 yards per reception was tops in the league. I mean, he only had 52 catches and he went over 1,000 yards. This team's passing volume is not going to go up that much. The chance of breaking those types of plays again, having that same kind of efficiency, that same big play streak, is unlikely. If you remember back, the last guy who had a breakout year as a rookie like this, where they were scoring touchdowns on long plays, was Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill, he had whatever it was, the 4 punt returns, kick returns for a touchdown. I think maybe it was 6 total that year. And he also had some long plays in the passing game. But what you saw there was a guy who was going to get more routes to run in a higher volume, in an offense that was going more and more towards high volume passing. This offense is shying the other way. And there's really no more routes for A.J. Brown to run. He was on the field a lot last year. So I just don't see how he can go up because he's not going to get any more efficient, and the volume doesn't seem like it's going to be going up if things go the way the Titans want them to go.
Go ahead, Bryce.
I disagree. I think you're wrong. I think A.J. Brown didn't see as much volume as people think. I mean, I guess he's a rookie. He was a rookie, but he stepped into the number 1 role pretty quick. Roughly about halfway through the season, I think people were just like, yeah, this guy's way better than Corey Davis. But he only saw 76 targets in the year, and I was just clicking. I'm looking at the rankings right now from last year, and I just clicked on the first 3 dudes above him and saw their targets, and all of them have over 30 more targets than him and barely average more points. So I see how you're saying it's big playability, the big plays that got him to where he was at last season. But it was his rookie year, and he finished at wide receiver 22, and there's a lot of wide receivers above him that I would not have more than him. He was also one of my breakout year candidates, so obviously I'm going to think you're wrong. I think he's going to get more targets, and with more targets, more receptions, which is going to lead to more yards. I don't know if he breaks the amount of touchdowns he got last year. 7 touchdowns is a good amount that's a great amount for a rookie. But I wouldn't be surprised if he did. I think he takes another step. I watched him play a lot last year. I watched the Titans several times last year. I liked their coach. I had some players in him in fantasy league. And I think I mentioned it when I talked about my breakout candidate, and it was like the 1 week that really sold me on him was when he played against the Jaguars in week 3, and he only got 1 point. And it wasn't his performance, obviously. It was like how he was playing against Jalen Ramsey. And Jalen Ramsey is arguably one of the best corners in the league right now. He might not have been super relevant, but his play is still extremely good. And he was fighting play in and play out with Ramsey, and he was getting open. Ryan Tannehill just couldn't always, or it was Marcus Mariota at the time, just couldn't get him the ball a lot of the times. So this man's a dog, and I think he can do it all over the field. He's got speed, he's big, he's got hands, and he runs routes well. So I don't see him regressing. I see him getting over 1,000 yards and getting 20 to 30 more receptions than he did this last year, personally. What do you think?
A wide receiver 2 needs like 8 targets a game at least to kind of get those averages on normally. A.J. Brown had 8 targets in just 3 games last year. They threw 448 passes. I just don't see it going up.
I'm not seeing this. He only got 8 or more targets on 2 on this page I'm looking at. He got 13 against the Texans, and then he got 8 against the Chargers for targets. I see a couple 7
and 8 against Houston in week 17.
Oh, okay, week 17. That's not showing up on here probably because we didn't. No fantasy plays that far. Yeah, so he had 3 weeks with 8 or more targets. I think he sees more targets. That's my thing. I think even if their passing volume stays the same, he's going to get majority of the targets. Who else is there to throw to? They can't throw to Derrick Henry, Jonnu Smith, I guess, and then Corey Davis.
Darrington Evans, who they brought in to catch passes, although Dion Lewis didn't do a whole lot of that last year. So
yeah, I don't think.
Anyways, Jay Wall, why don't you jump in? Because we could probably argue A.J. Brown a lot because I'm not a huge – I mean, I love the talent. I'm just not a huge fan still of the situation because I think it's so much based on the big play.
Yeah, I'm pretty split. Like, I definitely see both sides of it. For me, obviously, I think A.J. Brown is a stud and the talent's there, and I almost never bet against talent. And I think that Ryan Tannehill is I would say he's a very good quarterback in real life, but I don't like him in fantasy. And I also just know that based on how much they do pass the ball and how run heavy they are, I don't see A.J. Brown getting a ton more targets, but I do think that it is definitely more than 8 targets or 3 games with 8 targets or more, considering the first half of the season or whatnot he was with Marcus Mariota. And I was looking at his stats, and they were, pretty mediocre. And so having Ryan Tannehill and having that chemistry already, I think it'll help a lot. To me, would not be surprised to see another 1,000+ yard year for him. I think, there were a ton of big plays last year, but he'll always have that potential. The thing that is like a huge outlier can be touchdowns, and it looked like I think he had 8 last year, and so that's the thing that I think will kind of dictate where he goes, is if he stays around that many touchdowns or he drops down to like 2 or 3. So I think that'll play a big role, but I think he'll be a wide receiver too. But yeah,
I think high end wide receiver 2 is fair.
I don't know about
but
that.
I just don't think I think high end. He'll do better in 22. Wide receiver 22 is what he got last year. I think he's going to do better than that for sure.
Mid to late wide receiver 2, but again, dude has a ton of potential.
Yeah, potential's there for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not arguing that. My only point is the offense they're trying to run. But I will put in the caveat that, that whole offense was highly efficient last year. And so if everything regresses, the running game regresses, which is very possible and probably even probable, there is a chance that passing volume does go up and the volume becomes more efficient.
Yeah.
But if everything holds true, I don't think he can stay as efficient breaking those big plays. All right, my second guy, and this one's going to be probably a little crazy, but I'm going to go DK Metcalf as my guy. I have kind of regressing here in year 2, and it's not so much even necessarily a regression for him as a regression of what his perceived floor is going to be this year. I don't think it's as high as people think. He had a great rookie year for sure, but this team committed even more to the run in the offseason, which is nuts when you have a guy like DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett and a great quarterback like Russell Wilson, but they're always committing to the run, and they did that again this year. Carlos Hyde was the second best running back in the NFL last year between the tackles. They brought him in to work with Chris Carson. He's going to get work. The only guy who was more effective was Derrick Henry between the tackles. I mean, that's nuts. And so now you got 2 good running backs, plus you're eventually going to have that thing you got in the first round in Rashad Penny a few years ago coming off a pup. They've always have some sort of volume to the tight ends. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if DK Metcalf goes up, but I mean, he definitely exceeded expectations year one, and I think he's regressing below people's expectations in year two, not so much maybe statistically.
Go ahead, Jacob.
I'm not with you on this one, man. Like he is right now. He's like the great value version of Julio, right? So he's obviously not, but he's got that dog like mentality, but he doesn't have the skill set. I mean, that's obvious. But what I'm saying is, I mean, dude's just gonna get better and better and better because he's a hard worker. And Russ is a guy who's, a proven like top MVP caliber QB who can get his guys to the ball. And I think I'm obviously him and Lockett kind of do different things, but I think that DK has that potential of outscoring Lockett personally. And I think he does have an even higher ceiling this next season, at least, than AJ Brown does, just based off, to me, who's throwing to him. And I see him definitely not this year being a wide receiver one by any means, but I could see a ceiling of high, or I guess low end wide receiver. No, high end. Yeah, that's right. High end wide receiver two. Kind of flirting with that wide receiver one, just because I think that there was a lot of trust that was gained, especially that second half of the season, obviously, because he was a rookie with Russ, and they have that chemistry, and they're just continuing to build off of it.
Yeah, I again disagree with you, Rob, but I don't disagree as hard as I do with AJ Brown. I think DK, since he's in the number 2 role, and I think he's going to stay there with Tyler Lockett there, especially this upcoming year. He's going to see maybe the same amount of targets. He got I'm only looking at the fantasy season, so through weeks 1 through 16, he got 88 targets and 6 touchdowns. I could see the targets going up a little bit. I could see the touchdowns staying around the same, but I could see him being a little more efficient when it comes to the receptions and having a little more yards. So I think what you said at the beginning when you started talking about him is what people's perceived floor of him is too high. I do agree with that. I think DK Metcalf is coming into this season is pretty overrated, not like extremely overrated, but again, I think that's based on like how much hype he had in the offseason or like the year he was drafted, because that pictures of like how built he was and his speed were all over the place, right? And everyone's like, well, a dude built like that's got to perform, right? So talent doesn't always come with looks and physique. But I think he shocked a lot of people this upcoming season. I don't think many people saw him being the most, I think it was the number 3, third most productive wide receiver in fantasy. And it was like, that's a really good number 3 when you have 819 yards, again, I'm looking through weeks 1 and 16, but over 800 yards and 6 touchdowns and over 50 receptions. That's a good year for a rookie receiver. And the fact that 2 other receivers in Terry McLaurin and A.J. Brown had better years, that's a good wide receiver. It's a promising wide receiver class for this last year's draft. But I don't see him regressing. He averaged 11 points, roughly a little bit less than 11 points a week, and was wide receiver number 36. I see him sitting more in a wide receiver 2 role rather than the wide receiver 3 role he was just at this previous year.
Yeah, and I think I was probably playing a little fast and loose with the term regression.
Right.
Because you can't really regress off projection, right?
Right.
I mean, I think DKF is talented. Though there is one stat, though, that I think definitely regresses, and when you consider where his touchdowns came from, I think that pretty much all of them were in the red zone.
Mm-hmm.
And he led the NFL last year with 19 red zone targets as a rookie. That was 3 more than any other wide receiver. And they had no tight ends, right? Because everybody was hurt for most of the season. So also we saw when Josh Gordon came on. Those weeks he had like 0 red zone targets, and so if they were to go get back into the interests of Antonio Brown, and that was really kind of the area. I think when I first put him on the list, I was still thinking Antonio Brown might go to the Seahawks. But like I said, probably a little fast and loose there.
Happened.
But I think it's it just still some of the value I've seen on him for a guy who, I mean, obviously you're wanting to grab a rookie, a guy who had a year like he did is great. But yeah, I guess I'm expecting more a similar stat line to what he had than really progressing. So I'm just gonna do another guy here, and then we'll go back down the list. And I've got Aaron Jones, 19 touchdowns last year for Aaron Jones. That number's not repeating. They brought in A.J. Dillon, who I absolutely hate. I'm a Packer fan. I absolutely hate A.J. Dillon. Did not want him, but he's gonna get the goal line work. And it just bugs me. But I just don't see how you can put up 19 touchdowns again. Not when you're now splitting between 3 backs. He also had 27 carries inside the 20, something like that. So it was just crazy. 20 carries inside the 5, excuse me. So I mean, and his efficiency was great, but you're not going to get those kind of carries again inside the 5-yard line. So that's why I have him as a regression candidate just on touchdowns alone.
Yeah, so I agree and disagree. I think when Aaron Jones finished number 2 last year, obviously behind Christian McCaffrey, who we said had over 160 more points than them. Aaron Jones averaged 20 points during the fantasy season, and ended up number 2. So yeah, you can almost expect a regression because it's hard to imagine the same running back getting top 1 and 2 multiple years in a row. So yeah, the touchdowns you would think they're gonna reduce, but Aaron Rodgers loves Aaron Jones, and I don't know how much they're going to rotate the other backs into the backfield as long as Aaron Rodgers is there. It seems like they might use and abuse Aaron Jones this year and then try to move on to the man you hate in A.J. Dillon. So I see Aaron Jones getting a lot of touches again this year. A lot. He was kind of a boomer bust player too, like a little bit last year. He wasn't the most consistent running back because I'm looking here at the stats. He had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks of less than 10 points. And then 4 weeks above 30. So that's he's the guy that would probably win you some weeks and definitely lose you some weeks too. Because when you're talking about a guy you're expecting to be one of your highest point scorer, week in and week out, and he busts like that, it can be extremely frustrating. So that's where his average kind of sits there in the middle of those numbers, obviously. But I think Aaron Jones sees top 5 running back numbers again this year. I know I'm probably in the minority on that, but there's the top 3 that you kind of always know when you're talking about McCaffrey, Zeke, and Saquon. And then I feel like that 4 and 5 spot are very open, and there's a lot of good arguments for a lot of players in that spot. And I'm going to plug Godwin and Aaron Jones in the 4 and 5 spot. So Aaron Jones regressing out of the top 2 running backs, but I don't see him getting out of the top 5. If so, barely out of the top 5. But I'm also big on him. I own him in a lot of leagues.
So you got
and I gotta correct one thing quick. It was not nearly 20 carries inside the 5. It was 13. He had 8 touchdowns there. It was 19 inside the 10.
Okay.
And he had 11 touchdowns from there.
That's a lot of touches.
So again,
in the red zone.
where I expect A.J. Dillon's role to be is inside that 10-yard line.
See, but they like to – I feel like they do drive-by-drive, don't they, with them? They don't, switch running backs out in the middle of drives unless it's a long
That's what
drive.
they do. That's what they do with Williams and Jones, but why get A.J. Dillon in the second round?
I think Williams is going to be
if you don't have a role for him.
I think A.J. Dillon goes into Williams' role, and they start doing –
Well, A.J. Dillon can't catch, though, and that's what Jamal Williams does the best at.
Yeah, I guess.
Okay.
Jay Wall, you want to break into this argument again?
The named 5 top running backs and not Kamara killed me. You put Aaron Jones in there and not Kamara.
Where's Kamara at on this list? He's not even in the top 10. He was number 12 last year.
Because he was hurt.
Exactly.
Saquon Barkley missed 3 games and was above him.
Kamara missed 3 weeks.
Kamara still in the top 5. Wouldn't have even his average last year would have put him at running back 9. His average points scored every week. So that's why. Well, actually, if you take everybody's average, you would have put him at running back 10. So that's why I don't put him in the top 5. I don't like how they split the carries there.
I'm with you, Rob. But back to Aaron Jones. Okay, I love Aaron Jones. I think he's a super talented guy. Top 5, not even close. He's not going to do that again. I think he's going to be, at best, a low-end running back 1. I could definitely see that. But personally, I would never want him as my RB1. I just, kind of what you were saying with consistency, I'm huge in consistency, and that man is all boom or bust, which the booms are great, but the busts are frustrating. And so that's all I got to say on that. This whole Kamara thing has got me messed up.
He only averaged 16.8 last year.
Listen, the dude's allowed to have it down here when he's struggling with injury the whole year.
That's fine. I just thought I thought this last year was going to be the year he takes over, and it just looks like he disappointed. I feel like they just included Latavius Murray a lot more than people expected, and I think he's going to be a big part of the offense again this year. I think they're just using Kamara, I think he's a top 10, but I just don't have him in the top 5 because of how they use the running backs. I think he'd be top 5 if he was the only one there, to be honest. They share too much.
You're killing me.
Kamara finishes as a top. Kamara finishes as a top 5 running back this year, guaranteed, hands down. Book it. I'll put that one up against you at the end of the season. All right, we need to stop arguing a little bit, so just give us a little pause. Why don't we skip over to Jacob for your next regression guy?
My next guy, it's just like Christian McCaffrey. It's Lamar Jackson. I know. Honestly, the biggest thing for me in that is I think he genuinely has that capability of putting up those numbers, but the fact that he's talked about being more of a passing quarterback and less of a running quarterback does a lot for me. And to be honest, I'm still not super sold on their receiving core and just who they got there. I think Mark Andrews might even regress a little bit just in terms of fantasy points, not as a player necessarily. I think he's a stud. And again, I don't think he's going to fall out of the tight end 1. So, Rob, I see your face. but no, I think. But I think Lamar Jackson, kind of like Christian McCaffrey, still has that potential to be number 1. But I see him as more of a consistent top 5 for years to come versus he's for sure 1 or 2.
Yeah, I think Lamar Jackson definitely could have just peaked already in year 2. It's hard. It's going to be hard to redo the stats he just did and stay healthy. He got most of his points from running the ball. And again, like you said, when you're talking about the number 1 or it's very likely that they've already peaked. We could have already seen Pat Mahomes peak year when he threw 50 touchdowns. But it doesn't mean, like you said, it doesn't mean they're not going to be dudes that fall out of the top 5 anytime soon. So, he's a regression candidate in the sense of how many points he just put this last year. But I still like him as my number 2, the number 2 running back, arguably the number 1 in redraft to draft, year in and year out for right now. So, what do you think, Rob?
Yeah, I think he's a regression candidate, but I think so for different reasons. I think he's one of the better. I don't think we've seen a running quarterback like him before. Mm-hmm. The closest guy maybe being Michael Vick, but I also think Lamar Jackson is in a lot of ways a smarter runner than a lot of the running quarterbacks. He doesn't take as many hits. Once in a while he does some stupid things, maybe running, that could get him potentially injured at some point. But I don't feel like he takes as many big blows as some of these other rushing quarterbacks we've had, like a Cam Newton or that kind of thing. because he knows he doesn't have that same kind of body. So I think there's a chance. I think it's very possible he's another, rushing for 1,000 yards again, and his touchdowns might even go up. Where I think he's gonna step back is in passing touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he had 36 passing touchdowns last season,
Mm-hmm.
and he threw for 3,100 yards. Like, that's absurd. That means, what is that? Every 60 yards passing, he had a touchdown. That's absurd. I mean, you even look at Tom Brady having, a season with 50 touchdowns. That's an outlier season, right? But he's still having, 4,800 passing yards. I mean, when you're Lamar Jackson and you go 50, 60 yards, there's a touchdown. 60 yards, there's a touchdown. That's unheard of as far as efficiency in between touchdowns and yardage. That's where I think it's going to jump down. His touchdown percent was 9%. 9%. Aaron Rodgers' career average is like 4.7. Or excuse me, last year was 4.7. His career average is like 6.2. Like that's ridiculous. 9% is definitely the highest touchdown rate he's ever going to have. That's where they're going to step back. Even if he passes the ball more, and let's say he throws for 3,800 yards, I could see him only finishing with 28 passing touchdowns. And that's a big difference. Jay, why don't you hit us up again?
Yeah, another top guy from 2019 is Chris Godwin. I think he's a very talented receiver, but I think he again is just so overhyped. I think he does have wide receiver 1 potential again in 2020, but I genuinely also wouldn't be surprised if he finishes a wide receiver 2. They still have Mike Evans there, who's a dog, and of course they have Tom Brady, who will probably like Chris Godwin a lot. But again, they have O.J. Howard still. They have Gronk. They have all these running backs who all supposedly can catch the ball. I don't know. To me, there's no way he finishes at the 2 spot again. And I personally think that was just an outlier year in that he's talented, but he's just not that. He's not the alpha to me that a Mike Evans is.
Yeah,
All right. Well, I'm gonna. Oh, go ahead, Bryce.
No, I was just gonna say I agree. There's too much talent there, kind of like the situation in in Cleveland.
All right. Who's bigger, faster, and stronger, Julian Edelman or Chris Godwin? I mean, Julian Edelman last year had 153 targets from Tom Brady. Chris Godwin put up the numbers he put up on 121 targets from Jameis Winston. Now, you're right. He's a different player than Mike Evans. Mike Evans is the big play down the field guy, take the big shots to. Chris Godwin is getting all the routes that Julian Edelman ran. So assume they split the difference, and between what Winston threw to Godwin last year and what Brady has thrown, really kind of on average in a healthy season for Julian Edelman, which is in the 150 to 160 target range. So they split that difference. He takes a 20 target jump to 140. Based on his catch rate in his career, he's going to catch another 13 passes. They're going to be better passes, so his catch rate could very likely go up because there's no doubt about it. Tom Brady is a hell of a lot more accurate than Jameis Winston, and I just don't see it. I don't understand it. I think Chris Godwin is going to feast this year even more than last year with Tom Brady. That's my thought. I absolutely love Chris Godwin though.
He's going to be the number 1 overall, number 1 wide receiver this upcoming year.
I think he's got a chance because Mike Thomas is also likely going to regress. But Mike Thomas is just such a beast that it's. I'd say Godwin has a chance, but his chance, like everybody else who has a chance, is probably like 1%, because there's probably 10 guys with a 1% chance, and Mike Thomas has a 90% chance to repeat as number 1. So, but
I
definitely think he's in store for another great year.
Well, Rob, I think we disagree on something.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get to our last disagreement of the night. Bryce, who's your final guy?
Nick Chubb. I thought I couldn't remember if I used him on my players that were basically overhyped. And I mean, the only thing I have behind it is I absolutely think Nick Chubb is extremely talented, but I just don't like the situation he's in. Nick Chubb with Kareem Hunt or without Kareem Hunt on the field averaged 20 points a week. The day Kareem Hunt stepped into that offense, his average went down 5 points. So he went from averaging 20 a week to averaging 5 a week. And I think it continues. Why wouldn't you think it would when Kareem Hunt was actually extremely efficient when he was on the field? He's going to get his touches. He's going to be more involved in the pass game than Nick Chubb was, obviously because he's a better receiver out of the backfield. Nick Chubb did good at catching the ball out of the backfield, but as soon as Kareem Hunt came in, he's just better at it. So they utilized him. So I know some arguments to it is their offense is changing to where it's going to be a run-first offense, but I think to be quite honest, I think Kareem Hunt's the better running back. I think I would rather have him as a starter. He's always produced. I wish he would leave because I own him in so many leagues and I want him to be the starter. But I just think that with him in that offense, Nick Chubb sees a dip in his production, and I think that we saw it half the season last year, and I think it's just going to continue into this next year. I think Nick Chubb, still gets into the. I think he barely dipped out of the top 10. He ended up, I think, running back 7 last year. I think he ends up more running back 10 through 12. So it's not a huge regression, but I think it is as long as Kareem Hunt is there. If he leaves, that opinion completely goes out of the window. So what do you think, Rob?
Well, I don't think we have to worry about him leaving until 2021. So, but really for the most part, I agree with you on this one. Hunt's the better all-around player, definitely the better pass catcher. Chubb, though, it might be the best pure runner in the league. And that bodes well with this being a run-heavy offense. But, I also look, his running, how do I want to say this? His passing volume, in most of our leagues we play PPR, and passing volume is what's going to get you to the promised land. Very, very few times do you get a Derrick Henry type year where you catch almost no passes and you're going to finish top 5. Now, the way Nick Chubb was going without Kareem Hunt in the lineup, he would have caught about 50, 52 passes last year, which would have put him into that top 5 position. He's not going to do that with Kareem Hunt healthy, not suspended, all of that stuff. He only caught 11 balls in the 8 games that Kareem Hunt was active last year. So you go out over a 16-game season, that's only 22 catches. That's fewer catches than he had in the first 8 games of last year. So that's without the passing volume, I don't see how he can get top 5. He's at his peak as long as Kareem Hunt is there at 7. So, yeah, a regression is probably likely.
Yep.
Yeah, I am kind of in the same boat as you guys. I think that I would rather have Kareem Hunt personally, but I love Nick Chubb. Like, I think the dude is so talented. And I genuinely think that he has a higher ceiling without Hunt than Aaron Jones. Easy. Throwing shade at Bryce. But yeah, I find it hard for both of them to really just reach what they could if they were alone, or not even alone, but just like the top dog at their respective teams. But I just think Nick Chubb for me falls around like the more like RB 12, 13, 14. Like I feel like he like barely maybe falls out of that RB1 just strictly because of Hunt and what he brings to the pass game.
Yep. You have 2 number 1 backs there. Like it's just you have to use them both.
Mm-hmm.
So that's right. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, but Chubb really does have that top 5, top.
Yeah,
4.
he does. They both do. They both have top 5 talent, and they're on the same team, which is going to make them both not not running back one.
I know.
It's frustrating to see as a fantasy fan.
Right. For sure. Quick hitters. Anybody got any quick hit, one-line type guys on why you think they're going to regress that we haven't talked about yet?
I think Darren Waller. I think that, especially with Hunter Renfrow on the field, you just see his production just drop. And I think that Renfrow is going to be a lot more involved this year. I know they have Bryan Edwards, Henry Ruggs, and Williams obviously there. But I just think with all the talent that's coming, I just see a fall off for Waller, and I see him more as a tight end too this next year.
Yeah. Julian Edelman, no Brady, not as many targets, plain and simple. Getting old. He was wide receiver 6 last year. It'd be lucky to see him in the top 10.
And then,
all right, I think I'm going to throw one guy in there, and it's not so much I'm expecting a regression, but I'm worried about a regression, and it's Cooper Kupp. The way last season finished, there's definitely some concern there that hasn't been there in the past. But I'm a huge Kupp fan, and so I hope it's not the case. But there was some weird stuff going on with that Rams offense at the end of last year.
Yeah, it wasn't seeing you.
Yeah, it was crazy. Let's see. I want to remind everybody again, like and subscribe on YouTube. Hit that notification bell. You don't miss any of our Roto Heat content. We've got those streams dropping 5 nights a week, Monday through Friday, 9:30 p.m. Eastern. When we get into the season, Rick Butts is going to be hosting a Sunday morning show as well that I'm sure a lot of us will guest on throughout the year. Again, go to rotoheat.com. Check out all the great content our writers are putting out there. Here on YouTube, we're also dropping videos like every day, Dynasty Outlook stuff. J-Wall's been doing a lot on that, along with Brad Menendez, and those are some great content as well.
Don't forget Sully.
Sully's got his podcast. He's dropping, and he is probably the leading content producer on the website. Just absolute beasts, both him and Brad, just pumping out content on various platforms all the time. We got the Patreon, rotoheat.com/patron. If you'd like to support us in any way, we all do this for fun, but of course, operating websites and that cost money. And so if you're able to help us out in any way, that's great. There's the YouTube subscription competition going on. As soon as we get to 1,000 subscribers, Rick Butts is going to be giving away either a $100 Fanatics gift card or a Madden MVP edition. Right now, we're 18 subscribers shy. All you need to do is subscribe, take a picture, send that to admin@rotoheat.com via email, or drop it in the Facebook, or any other way you know of to get a hold of Rick Butts if you know of it in some other way. So, and then. I don't see that we have any questions here tonight that we've gotten. Did you guys get any on your ends?
I didn't see. I don't see any.
All right. I see we got some cheers there from Jaws Whedon. Cheers to Jaws as well, who tunes in all the time to our live streams. Always joining us here on YouTube. And once again, if you want to listen back to any of this, you can listen both on YouTube or find it in the podcast form. For Jacob and Bryce, I'm Rob, signing off. Join us next week for another edition of the Fantasy Inferno, when we'll have, maybe we'll have J-Wall back as a guest, because I will be out. It'll be Bryce and Rob Sullivan for sure, and we'll be talking about rookies in redraft and where they're going to fall. And I'm sure Clyde Edwards-Helaire and his astronomically rising ADP will be top of that discussion for those